Aloha! Welcome to Week 2, Lecture 1. This lecture is to go with your Swift Playgrounds number 1 assignment. In this video lecture, we are going to get an introduction to variables and strings in the Swift programming language. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, guys. So it's important to note here that if you did not complete assignment number 1, there isn't any way that you're going to be able to start this Swift Playgrounds number 1. So please go back to week 1, the video that accompanies assignment number 1, and do that before you proceed to this video. Okay, so as you guys can see here, I have my GitHub desktop open. And in order for us to get started here, we have to find the local repository that we were using last week called Intro to Swift Playgrounds. So we need to make sure that we have this, we know where this directory is, and we want to open this directory. And remember that we created a Swift playground called Swift Playgrounds 1. This is the file that we are going to be working out of. So go ahead and open that file. Okay, this looks pretty familiar to us. So before we begin, I want to emphasize that iOS development requires you to learn a programming language called Swift. This may be the first time that you are learning a programming language. So we're going to take it really slow, and some of these concepts you may not understand now, but as we move through the course, you will start to understand the different concepts and why we take this approach to programming. Swift was developed by Apple. As you learn more about Swift and the foundational concepts of programming, we can start turning that into simple iOS applications. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to introduce you to variables. What is a variable? A variable is like a container and it holds a specific type of information, or I'll say data type or just data. How do we declare a variable in Swift? In Swift, you declare a variable by creating a new variable with the word var before it, and then you give that variable a name. After we name our variable, we can declare what type of data it will hold. So let's go ahead and do some typing here. So what we're going to do is we're going to declare and give our first variable a type. So as I mentioned, you always declare a variable by using the word var in front of it. And for the purposes of this exercise, we're going to call it my first variable. And spelling really matters in programming. So you want to be sure that you spell things correctly. So you've got var, my first variable. We're going to put a colon here, and we're going to give it a type string. So our first variable is a data type called string. So what is a string? A string is a series of characters. Let's go ahead and assign my first variable to a string. So we're going to go my first variable, and you can use autocomplete. That was kind of fast. So it's my first variable. So I'm going to pause here and go over this. Once you've already declared it with var, every time you use the variable again, you don't need to put var in front of it. You can just use my first variable because we've already declared it as a variable. So your program now knows that it's a variable. So you don't need to continually identify it as such. And then we are going to assign it to a string. So I've created my first variable. My first variable. Okay. So a couple things that you noticed here is that the quotations are really important. So here the compiler recognizes that automatically recognizes that this is a string because we've declared it as a string, but we've also put quotations around the series of characters here. So that will also tell the compiler that this variable is a string variable. Now, just to kind of help us understand data types a little bit more and how important it is to declare a data type for your variable, is let's see what happens if we erase this. So we're going to erase this right now, and we're going to put the number 5, and let's see what happens. Ooh, okay. Cannot assign value of type int or int to type string. So what we're seeing here, guys, is that variables, once we declare it a certain type, in this case we declare it as a string, it cannot be declared as an integer in this. This is actually telling us that this is an integer. Now, if we want to make it a string, all we have to do is put quotation marks around it and it likes. So this is no longer an integer, it's a string. Okay, it's a character. So let's go ahead and put our string, our original string back in. So I've created my first variable. And now we're going to do something with strings. So I'm going to show you guys how to comment here. So here we're going to say we're going to do something with strings. Okay, so we're going to do something with our strings. But right now we've only got, we're going to actually erase this because we don't really need that. The first variable so we only have one string. Let's see if we can figure out how to combine two strings. How do you think we do that? Did you guess that we have to create another variable of type string? Okay, so we actually have to create another variable. But we're going to do something different this time. We're going to go var my second variable, and we're just going to go ahead and declare the type right now just by assigning it to a string. And we want to use the string, and look, I added two strings together. Okay, so you got it, guys. We're going to learn how to create, how to combine two strings together or add two strings together. Okay, so how do we do that? Seems like maybe addition would make sense. So maybe let's try something like this. This is just kind of coming to my mind right now. Okay. So expected expression after operator. So it's kind of nice that in playgrounds it sort of tells you, right, that I've created. So let's actually expand this panel here. So I've created my first variable, and look, I've added two strings together. So that's awesome, right? We've added two strings together by adding the two variables, and playground tells us the result. So if we're not in playgrounds, this, we wouldn't, in playgrounds, we sort of get to play around and see what happens as we are coding. But one thing to note here, and it's going to be sort of tricky to understand, is that in order to access this result, we need to actually assign it to a third variable. Okay, so what we want to do here is we're going to go var my third variable, and we're going to just take this and we're going to put that together. So now remember that variables are containers. So we have a container where we have the two strings that are added, so they're held in that container. And now whenever we use my third variable, we can access the addition of these two strings, and we can do things to it, like we can use the print function to print the variable. We can access the answer here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the print function, and in the print function, all we have to do is type in my third variable. And as you noticed, if we print the variable, we get the same answer here as the top one. So let's review what we just learned about variables. We learned that variables are containers. We learned that variables have a name and can be assigned to only one data type. Strings are a data type that contains a series of characters that, when assigned, are always surrounded by opening and closing quotation marks. We learned how to add two strings together, and we learned how to print a string variable using the print function. All right, so that wraps up the Swift Playgrounds #1 assignment. Remember, guys, that this is 20 points. And so, guys, remember that we're not done yet. Okay, so what you need to do now is you need to commit and sync your GitHub desktop to github.com. So let's go ahead and save. Oops, not duplicate. Let's go ahead and save. And let's go ahead and quit Xcode. Okay, let's go here. So we have two uncommitted changes. So we can say here that finished Swift Playgrounds 1 assignment. Okay, so that could be your commit message. We're going to commit to master. And we're not done yet, guys. We need to sync. Okay, so it looks like no uncommitted changes. Now we always should confirm that the changes have been made. So let's go ahead and there we go. So finished Swift Playgrounds 1 assignment. So one thing I want to show you guys is when I am going in and looking at your assignments and making sure that you followed along the videos or doing the assignments correctly, I'm actually going to be giving you credit based on what I see in your code. So I can actually open this up. I can go in contents.swift and I can actually look at your code. So this is how I'm going to be grading everything that you turn in. I'm able to look at your code right in your GitHub account. So remember, to get credit for your assignments, your code needs to be up in GitHub. Very, very important. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Aloha.